Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to X-Axis Factor. This is something new we're trying at Science Gallery. So not only are we putting the votes in your hands tonight, we're actually putting the academic future of two of Trinity's most popular professors in your very hands. So you'll notice there's people going around the room with some clickers. So this is going to be a live voting system. I feel like I'm going to be saying live a lot tonight. You'll see on the little clicker you're handed, there are a number of buttons. So we'll explain as we go. At various points during the talks, you'll see a slide that asks you to pick a letter, and then you press the letter of your choice on your little pad. Don't press them now. Also, for each vote we have, you only have one vote. So maybe take a second before pressing it, because if you press it repeatedly, it'll only be counted once. Also, I'd like to point out they're worth nothing without the rest of the software and the things we have up here. So please don't leave with them, because they're not worth anything really to you without the rest of the stuff. If you can manage to take everything away, then well done. Yeah. So no. So please don't take them with you. That'd be great. So does everyone have a clicker? If anyone doesn't have a clicker, just raise your hands. Okay, great. So everyone came in, and the physicists sat on this side, and the biologists on this side. Is that right? No? Ah, good. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to introduce our two speakers tonight. In the green corner, weighing in at 700 newtons, we have that's order of magnitude. Professor Shane Bergin. He'll be speaking for physics. In the other green corner, speaking for biology, we have Professor Aoife McLysaght. So before I invite our first speaker to the stage, there's a couple of things we need to do. Because it's X-Axis Factor, that's kind of a play on X Factor for anyone that didn't get it. It's kind of like a nerdy version of X Factor. Or like scientist celebrity deathmatch is what we're going for here. So we'd like as much participation from the audience as possible. So as well as the voting, we're also going to ask for 3 volunteers to act as judges. So throughout the evening, we'll get their opinion, and they have complete. Okay, let's just say if you're in physics or biology and you get picked to be a judge, whatever you say as a judge won't affect your exam results. So much. Both speakers have assured me that they'll be impartial for the night. So could we have some volunteers to be judges? Just raise your hands, or else I go around and pick people. Yes. Yeah, take a seat. And 2 more? I think we might have someone who might have done physics at some point. So one of the biologists might need to raise their hand. Don't make me pick. No, you don't have to be a trained student at all. No, absolutely. I think you just volunteered yourself. Come on up. Thanks very much. And one more. Do we have someone volunteering someone down here? Is that grounds for the person volunteering? Come on up. They
can make whatever kind of comments they like, right? You can just
Absolutely. So just
anything goes.
Anything goes. So just quickly, I'm going to ask you just to say your name and which side you're leaning for at the start, and we'll come back to you throughout and see if you're changing your mind.
Hello everyone, my name is Katrina and I'm Team Physics.
Hello, my name is Mirza. I don't know what team to choose really.
I'm Andrew and I'm going for physics, definitely.
So Aoife has her work cut out for her already. Okay, the next thing we need to do is we need to check that the voting system works. So clickers at the ready. Okay, this is pretty straightforward. If you're right-handed, press A. If you're left-handed, press B. If you're ambidextrous, press C, and press D if you want to spoil the vote, I guess. So please press now. I think I should be able to tell We've got 50 people responding already. Still a few more coming in. That's great. Keep pressing them. Great. Okay. We have about 61 people, so I'm just going to see if this works. Oh, look at that. I think we're going to be okay. Yeah, so some real science there. Okay, so now we're going to invite our first speaker. So please put your hands together for Professor Shane Bergin.
Good evening. So, a couple of weeks ago, I was having lunch with Aoife, my friend. And I said I'd love to start a series of debates in the Science Gallery to get students talking across disciplines. And I said I have a couple of ideas. And the first one I had was something that I've kind of always believed, a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but I kind of think it's true. It's that physics has done more for biology than biology has done for biology. And that's an amazing statement to make. To claim that one discipline has done more for another than it has done for itself. But let's explore why. I'm going to give you 3 main reasons tonight. And the first one is all about images. It's all about the tools that biologists use. And by biologists, I mean medics, doctors, anatomy, biology, all those things that are on the smelly side of campus that I don't venture into, right? The stuff that I couldn't remember at leaving cert because my memory is not that good. So I'm showing you the world's first X-ray. It was taken by a guy called Röntgen. He was German, and it's his wife's hand. And he did not invent this so that doctors could distinguish between hard bone and soft matter. He did this because he was playing with electrons. He was a physicist. He was in his lab. He was having a play with cathode ray tubes, which is the precursor of the old-style TV. And when he did this, he discovered that he produced something called the X-ray. And he was he's such a genuine guy that he wouldn't let the scientific community call it the Röntgen ray. He insisted it be called the X-ray. So there's example number 1, but it doesn't stop there. It goes right up to, I hope the clicker works. No, okay. It goes right up to more modern techniques. What you can see here is an MRI scan, magnetic resonance imaging, and it's going through, sectioning through a human brain. Now, all of these imaging techniques were showing a human body, like the centerpiece of biology perhaps, for the first time, the inside of it, without killing the subject. Before that, biologists were rather more hack it up and have a look, right? Physics came along, and we were able to give them a window into their biological worlds, enlightening them in a positive way. So next, we come to electricity, right? ECG, EEG, all of these scans that you can do across various biological setups to understand what's going on in the salty sea that is the human body. But it doesn't stop there. Those things are on the large scale, the macro. But physics has also given biologists tools to look down at the tiny, the micro, and indeed today the nano. So I put it to you that Hooke, a physicist, was one of the world's best biologists. He first described the cell, the unit of life perhaps. And he did this when he worked with his microscope. And this is an image of his microscope. And with it, he was able to look at, for the first time, tiny biological entities. And this continued right through to, and we'll come back to this later on, you know this image, Aoife, it's the X-ray diffraction pattern, right? So again, using X-rays developed by physicists. And this was the image that allowed Watson and Crick to understand the double helix nature of DNA, the molecule of life. And this was taken by a physicist working in London, and unfortunately she was completely ignored by the scientific community for various reasons. I'm sure it wasn't because she was a physicist. But her contribution to biology cannot be ignored. And this, perhaps one of the defining images of the 20th century, contributed to the world by physics. And going right up to what's possible today, we can look at images of macromolecules, such as this is DNA. So you can see here the helix of the DNA molecule, and this is taken using a scanning tunneling microscope. All of these techniques have given biology their window It has allowed them to look closer. It has allowed them to look at living organisms. It has allowed them to understand more about their own discipline than they had previously been able to. We've given them the tools. It's like saying, what's physics without mathematics? What is biology without the window to look at the biological world? Well, let's see. There's one more thing. You see the symbol, you immediately think of death, right? It's the symbol for radiation. However, biologists have been tagging cells with isotopes, which are radioactive byproducts, basically since physicists invented isotopes. This has been massively important in understanding how medicine works when it interacts with the human body. So, it's over to you, Aoife.
Thank you, Shane. So after each point is made, the opponent will have a chance to respond. So the floor is Aoife's.
I'll respond and I'll go on. So thank you, Shane, for being so predictable. So I just knew that Shane was going to go, oh, we gave you X-rays, we gave you lasers, and all this kind of thing. So it's a bit like saying, if I give you a pen, I own everything you write with it. Okay, so these are tools brought by physics, but they're only tools. So by saying that physics has done more for biology, so this extremely offensive motion, physics has done more for biology than biology has done for biology. Like, we're completely incompetent, we can't do anything for ourselves. It completely underestimates and misrepresents the inventiveness and the creativity of biology as a field. And just because, okay, so yeah, a physicist invented X-rays, but he didn't see the possibilities. Biologists saw the amazing stuff you could do with this. Biologists had the amazing, interesting questions to answer with this. And it was, in terms of biology, so these amazing things that have been done, the interesting uses these things have been put to has all been to do with biology. So I suppose I guess that Shane doesn't really know what biology is. And in this case, if he thinks it's just pointing an X-ray at something and going, oh, well, look, it worked. It's all to do with asking interesting questions and figuring out new things about the world. But biology is older than that, and biology is older than X-rays. In fact, you could say that biology exists as a field based on what we learned from Darwin, right? So, because so Darwin, of course, told us about evolution and common descent, a descent from a common ancestor, is what unites biology as a field. Without evolution, without common ancestry, then you just have people studying microorganisms, you've got people studying flies, you've got people studying plants, you've got people studying humans, but there's nothing that unifies them all. And so, in fact, biology makes sense because of evolution, and evolution makes sense of biology. And this was said, this beautiful phrase, nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution, was said by Dobzhansky. And so, so Shane, I just knew he was going to say this. I knew he was going to say, oh, look, we gave you lasers. Probably lasers is your next point, is it? Okay, good, because it'll get really boring. But, but so in terms of then, so this whole idea that biology is nothing but pointing a physics machine at something is a complete misrepresentation of what we do in biology. And I suppose the other misunderstanding of biology is that some people call it stamp collecting, right? They say, oh, look, all you're doing is going around and look, here's another odd one, here's another odd one, here's another odd one. And you get this collection of oddities. Darwin spent years studying barnacles. People thought he was nuts. And he spent another significant amount of time studying pigeons, racing pigeons and that have been bred, and looking at all of these. And because he was collecting meticulously collecting evidence for his theory of descent with modification and common ancestry and evolution. And so by this unifying principle, the best-selling science book ever, never been out of print. And this was nothing to do with X-rays, nothing to do with lasers. This was to do with the careful and cool application of logic. And that's what biology is about. There we go. That's my point.
Okay, so next up, we're going to go to our first vote of the evening. While we're voting, I'm going to get some feedback from the judges, and then we might take one or two questions from the crowd. Well, am I right in thinking that one of Shane's first points was that biologists are smelly? Yeah. that's actually one of the possible topics for a future x-axis factor is that computer scientists have worse personal hygiene than physicists. So come along for that. Okay, so we'll get the clicker again. Okay, so clicker's at the ready. Has physics done more for biology than biology has done for biology? A is yes, B is no, C is maybe, D is a spoil vote. You can start voting. Oh, you started already, great. Okay, so while you're voting away, I'm going to get some feedback from the judges. What do you think so far?
Can you come back to me?
Okay. Judges are thinking. Would you like to say anything?
Yeah. Shane's speech had a great structure, funny bits and cool images as well. Also, the examples of the use of physics in biology was actually quite an eye-opener for me, as in I never knew that before.
Okay, you guys just do what he did there in future. That was great. Thank you. Does anyone from the floor have any questions they'd like to put to the speakers at this point? There will be opportunities for questions throughout, so I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but be thinking of things. If they say something you don't agree with, feel free to get involved. Anyone want to take that first plunge? Yes, question at the back. Hold on, I'll come down to you.
Wasn't Hooke a natural philosopher rather than a physicist?
Yeah, so Hooke was a natural philosopher, but all physicists were. So the oldest chair in college is actually the chair of natural philosophy, and that chair still sits in the School of Physics, so it's the extension of that idea. So it's quite a recent thing, though, that our disciplines have been broken down into physics, chemistry, biology, but he would certainly have been captured by the idea of physics at the time. Of course, Hooke's law being his greatest contribution. He was also a bit of an egotist. He had rows with almost everyone in London when he was alive. Who hasn't?
That was great. Just in future, we'll use the mics for the answers as well. Cool. Thanks very much. Okay, so we're ready to see the results? A mixed reaction there. You guys voted for this. This is your doing. Okay, so that doesn't like. Yeah, if anyone feels the need to leave, they're allowed. Anya at the back will let you leave, so yeah, don't worry if you have to go. Okay, we're going to move on to our next point. So I'd like to invite Shane back up again.
Great.
A lot of slides.
I do. Lots to say. Thanks, Aoife. That was really... if I was predictable, then I think you fell into my trap, because I wanted to start by showing all of the tools that physicists have created, and we've given this to the world at large. And the biologists, yes, you have seen further with these tools than perhaps the scientists who worked on that initially might have done. But I don't think that it's just because they were biologists that they did that. I think, in fact, it was a lot of the time the use of physical deduction, that reducing complex systems to more, simpler systems. And that's what physics is about. It's about seeing simple things in chaos, right? And when I thought about everything that's known in biology, which is a lot, because people have been collecting stuff in biology for hundreds of years, I thought of this. I thought this is kind of a library in biological terms. It's everything, right? There's so much information. I've heard it said that biology is just like a minefield of information, knows so much data, but it's sorting that out. It's seeing the wood for the trees. That's important. And this brings me then to, because this point, if you didn't do that, and it's really important, this is what a physicist would think of a kiwi, right? And that's great, right? But really, we need to make a little bit more sense about this. And I refer to the hero of physicists here, Richard Feynman, who said, never talk about biology or physics and biology in front of a biologist. It really makes them mad, all right? Because biology, whilst it started off with all this collection, it was reduced to chemistry first, right? Understanding how basically macromolecules work, And as science is pushing forward, it's being driven towards physics. It's now getting to the point that we're able to apply the sense in physics to biological systems so that we can properly understand them. And it's not to say that the work that's been done by biology hasn't been incredible. It has. Physics would not have been able to cope with that. You guys got the hard stuff, right? At the very beginning, when they were handing out stuff to figure out, we were given things like dropping apples, right? And that's where it started. But we've come a long way from there. It's not as simple as that. So Feynman, he said, you know what, and he said this in the 50s, he said, yeah, physics has a lot to say about biology, but to be honest with you, we haven't a clue what we're talking about just yet. And it's gone from there. And I show this guy, Max Delbruck, and he worked in the 40s and 50s, and he said that basically we need to start reducing the complexity of biology so we can start to get a handle on things. So we can start to think about things in the theories with the predictive power that physics has, right? Physics laws stand. They are absolute most of the time, right? It's not true to say that most things in biology enjoy that same level of accuracy. And physicists have done more than invent. They've done more than given the tools to enable biologists. What is Life is a book based on a series of lectures that was presented here in Trinity by a guy called Erwin Schrödinger. And Schrödinger, for those of you that haven't enjoyed physics before, would perhaps know him through the idea of Schrödinger's cat. You know, is the box dead, or is the cat dead or alive in the box? How does that work? Science. So Schrödinger, he worked on a lot of things. He was a big thinker as well as a womanizer and a Dubliner for a couple of years. And he said, well, basically, there must be some molecule, an aperiodic molecule that has the genetic key to life, this sense of hereditary between cells when they divide. How do they carry information? And he did an awful lot of the groundwork with Max Delbruck. And also, coupled with that, we have a show again, Franklin's image, right? So Schrödinger's foundations with Franklin's images were recognized by Crick and Watson as being absolutely crucial to them going on the right road to eventually determine the structure of DNA, right? And DNA, of course, being perhaps, would you agree, it's one of the most significant biological discoveries of the 20th century? As I really have to say, I know so little about biology. I haven't done it since junior cert, but I've learned so much doing this. It's been incredible. So from there, on to something else. Another use of the modeling in physics where it can be applied to biological systems. Another guy called Haldane, right? He looked at, again, at hereditary processes, but he looked at it from a very simplistic point of view. He didn't go and have something in the lab and make a culture and do some sort of experiment that way. He thought about it using colored beans, and he was looking at the evolution of, I believe, of randomness. But basically, he seemed like an eccentric character. He said that had biologists listened to his way of doing things, they would have figured out what they did around 20 or 30 years earlier than they should have, because people really didn't believe the analogy. Biologists love using analogies that are alive because they think life is you know, it's absolute, that you must have a living analogy. But physicists have been able to show that. We've been modeling things using computers for as long as computers have been around. So I think what I've shown you there is that not only have we developed the tools, but it's our way of thinking that's contributed to biological advances. It's not to say that physical thinking is like, you know, supersedes all of the disciplines in science. It's not a physicist getting up with hubris and saying that. It's saying that the way that physicists think is different to other scientists. It's the reduction of a complex theory into something very, very simple, so it can give you absolutes. And from that, then, you can have the foundations for larger advances in science.
Okay, so Shane seems to think that physicists own logic, which you don't. Sorry about that. So logic has been a huge part of biology, especially genetics, for a long time. predates computers, by the way. And so you mentioned a few people. You mentioned Delbruck, you mentioned Haldane, you mentioned Schrödinger. So Schrödinger gave his great lecture here, and definitely it was an inspirational lecture. Delbruck trained as a physicist, but are you going to, when you say physics, so the motion is physics has done more for biology than biology has done for biology. Biology as a field is not a person. So if somebody trains initially in physics and then they become a biologist, they are doing biology, right? They're not doing physics. So and biology was already extremely logical, and it was ripe for people with training in physics to come into because it was already logical. It was already based on logic and deduction. So I'm going to present to you an organism that a physicist, or something that a physicist would never consider using for studying physics. This is my prop for the day. Can you still hear me? I'm now a fruit fly. This was made by some of my students. This is the kind of stuff we get up to. Okay, so the fruit fly was used as a model organism for genetics. It's a beautiful mask, isn't it? Using the fruit fly and doing experiments with a fruit fly. Shit, sorry. And using pure logic. So using flies in the lab and using pure logic, Thomas Hunt Morgan deduced the existence of genes on chromosomes using pure logic, and the paper was published in 1915, nothing to do with computer simulations there. Right, so this is using pure logic. You can do experiments with the fruit flies, and one thing in biology and in genetics especially is we treasure our exceptions, because with genetics and with the flies, the main thing that they were interested in were the differences between them and how were these differences transmitted. So we have flies, so this is the wild type, this is what a fly should look like, obviously, with red eyes, and they had flies with white eyes, and they had all kinds of weird deformities, mutations. The mutants of biology are the insight into discovering genes and how genes work. And this is done with pure logic. One thing you didn't mention about Delbruck, so I would count Delbruck as an early geneticist, actually, maybe training in physics, but he came in and he did pure genetics. He used those X-rays you talk about, and he managed to figure out the size of a gene doing genetics. Crick, I'll tell you this because you don't know any biology, Crick trained as a physicist, but he became a brilliant geneticist. He started as a physicist, but when he was doing biology, he was a biologist, he was doing genes. He studied the structure of DNA. Watson rifled through Rosalind Franklin's notes. Did you get that part? So yeah, he rifled through her notes to see that picture, and he was kind of a bit shoddy, really. And so these people, when they did some training as physicists, some of them, not all of them, but became geneticists and became biologists and were working with pure logic. And this is because biology was already logical. There was an opening for people who thought like logically to come in and study some interesting questions for a change. So one of the things, one of the weird things you see as well with flies, so this is a normal fruit fly. This one has legs growing where the antenna should be. And this is a mutant, and this is a particularly spectacular mutant because this is a tiny genetic change. And this was discovered by using fruit flies in the lab, an approach that no physicist would ever take, right? So a physicist would never study flies and looking at the variations in flies. By doing this, they discovered there are genes, very simple genes and quite a few genes that lay out the animal body plan. And in a sense, code for the information for where the different parts should grow. When these are messed up, wrong things grow in the wrong place. So these are fruit fly legs that grew where the antenna should be. And then other amazing discoveries followed on from this. So there's a set, this is a small set of genes, it's only 13 genes, and it lays out the body plan, the head to tail end. Then people were thinking about this and wondering about this, and they're saying, well, you know, flies, okay, so flies have their body structure. It's completely weird and strange, but we want to try and discover how this works in mammals, and there's no way it's ever going to be the same. And the ink wasn't dry on such a statement before they discovered that the exact same genes as work in flies to lay out the body plan lay out our body plan. This was an amazing discovery in genetics and biology, unifying the whole process of development, the growth from a fertilized egg into the final adult form, unifying it across all animals. And these are discoveries that come from looking at weird things and studying them in the lab and thinking logically like a geneticist.
I mean, they both make valid points, but really there's been a distinct lack of personal attacks here. Just remember that if you do make your opponent cry, it's an automatic win, so just bear that in mind. Okay, so while we're voting, I'm going to get some feedback from the judges. Katrina, would you like to offer your opinion on proceedings so far?
Now, definitely, Aoife, you've made some really, really interesting points, and it does kind of, enlighten me a little bit as a physicist. But I have to say now, when it comes to problem solving, you said physicists don't own logic. But when it comes to problem solving, I think the best way to practice is to solve physics problems and think about physics. That's why probably Schrödinger was able to come out of his, quantum mechanics and come into, what is life, and be able to use his skills, not, physics skills, but this analytical problem solving, critical thinking, and be able to go out and do all this biology stuff. So yeah.
I agree with my colleague. I think that physics has better methods, and these methods have bigger potential than the ones used in biology. So biology in the long run has more impact on its field, but that long run has to start somewhere, like the microscopes, the X-ray, MRI. Also, the biologists you mentioned, did they start off as physicists, all of them? Yes.
So, some people, but it's a bit like anybody you can have a training in one thing and you can change field.
Yeah, I understand.
And so, my point was that they did not come into biology and change biology.
I understand.
Biology was a suitable substrate for them because they.
The point. Sorry.
Oh, what I mean, it didn't change it from unlogical to logical. The point was you were claiming logic as the part of physics.
No.
And so biology was already logical.
Yeah, I understand, but couldn't you make out from this that they used the methods of physics because they were more familiar with physics than other biologists? So they introduced the methods of physics into biology because they were more familiar with both fields.
So Crick played with models, played with models in the same way that a child would play with a jigsaw to figure out the structure of DNA. I don't know if would you class that as a classical physics technique. I think it was his own technique he invented for himself. Crick later, just with pure imagination and logic based on creating mutations in DNA sequences, they deduced the genetic code. So they first of all deduced that the code must be 3 letters long, must be read 3 letters at a time. And later on, they deduced by doing experiments, manipulating DNA, and then looking at the outputs, they figured out how DNA codes for proteins. So they deduced the code. And so this is an extremely logical approach because logic is the way to go, but logic does not belong to physics. Logic has been part of biology for a long time. And so these were not physics techniques. This was pure genetics, pure biology, and it was revealing the fundamental principles of all life. And if you want to talk about discovering, unifying, simplifying principles, Darwin looked at this amazing diversity of life on this planet, this cacophony of all kinds of everything, and went, but there's one rule that explains all of it. And in terms of looking at genes and discovering genes are common to all organisms, discovering that not only are genes in general in common to all organisms, but specific genes are shared by all animals. It's not physics, it's biology.
In order to be able to apply logic, you first have to know how to use it and have some kind of practice with it. So therefore, that's where physics comes in. Without this experience, perhaps they wouldn't have been able to make the transition.
I don't doubt that physics is a good way to practice logic, but I would argue that it's not the only way to practice logic. So I'm not saying that physicists are not logical, and I'm sure the work is logical and is really good training in logic, but it's not exclusively the only training in logic. That would be my...
Any questions from the floor?
I've got a comment rather than a question. Shane, you very cleverly put up Dick Feynman there, who was perhaps the best theoretical physicist of the 20th century. But you may not know that Dick had a year off and he went in Caltech straight across the corridor to the biology, and he did a bit of molecular biology, and he made a very significant bit of work on genetics.
Yes, and He studied behavior in ants, and he thought biology was really cool as well.
He did.
Also,
Read his biography.
while we're Mike, you can keep the microphone because you can back me up on this, right? Because there's another thing Feynman said. Because Feynman was asked if you could go back in time and he could start with just one piece of knowledge, what would it be? And he said that the atom exists because physics denied the existence of the atom that chemists knew for a long time, which sent them off in the wrong direction for a long time. And when they finally realized, oh shit, yeah, there is such a thing as an atom, then a lot of things worked out. So there you go with your logic.
I'd agree.
Sorry, Shane, I've been depriving you of a microphone. So we have a chemistry, biology alliance over here. So any geologists out there?
Mike entered the room favoring Shane, I'll just point out.
The amount of stuff that physics doesn't know is just huge, but we're always the first to put our hands up and say it. We don't know what matter is. That fact is absolutely astounding, that we do not know the basic unit of mass in the universe and how it's made. Absolutely incredible. But we're the first people to say it. Yes, we denied the atom. We denied a lot of things, but when the proof was given, we've also taken a lot of things. Yes, we claim logic as our own. Mike will well know that we've tried to claim the outer electron as our own, but we've given it back to chemists, I think. You've done a great job. But physics knows what it doesn't know. I think there's that Rumsfeld quote, there's unknown unknowns and there's known unknowns, but physics knows about the known unknowns. And there's a huge amount of them out there. That's why we build amazing things like CERN, and we're going to put a massive interferometer into space. All of the amazing things that are done are physics. You ask anyone out there to name top 5 scientists, they're going to ream off 5 physicists. I guarantee you there might be a chemist thrown in, but that'll be it.
Another question?
Every time a physicist does something for biology, is that not a point in favor of the motion?
Yes. Are we both in agreement on that?
Well, it depends. Are they doing physics? The motion is not physicists have done more. The motion is physics. Are they doing physics besides? No.
Semantics. We're going to move on.
It's a hair I'm splitting.
Okay, so we're going to see the results of that vote. Are we? Okay, so we're going to move on to the final points. Maybe we'll keep the points a little bit briefer if we can.
All right, okay. So I've shown you where we started. I've shown you the window on the biological world that we have kindly given you guys, and you've done amazing things with it. And then I've shown you, and yes, I've dared to claim that logic is an extension of physics, and they're one and the same thing. And it's not just the logic, but it's the way we apply the logic. It's the reductionist theories that we can produce. There are very few theories in science that have the predictive power of physics. And in the coming years, we're going to start rolling into biology in a big, big way. And we want to do it in collaboration, but it's physics. It's physics, physics, physics. It's called biophysics. And one thing I'm going to point at here is the computer, right? So we're talking about logic. Well, one of the best manifestations of logical deduction is to use a computer, is to work things out quickly, okay? And when physicists first invented the computer with the help of mathematicians and a couple of others besides, yes, predictive power was immediately used. It was used to decode Nazi messages, and since it's gone on to model amazingly complex biological systems using on the face of it, very, very simple physics, Newtonian physics and interactions of electrostatics, etc., etc. And we can now model extremely complex biological macromolecules. And understanding how that works, we're starting to stitch up together all of the different areas of science, from genetics to the bigger stuff in science, like the microbiology that my dad enjoyed. But there's more, right? One of the major advances of physics in the 20th century was quantum physics. And now we are at the dawn of quantum biology. It is explaining things that have confounded biologists for a long, long time. For instance, I have read of coherence effects. This is a quantum effect in the photosynthesis reaction, which is showing, it's basically highlighting how photons that are absorbed from the sun, that's bits of light, are absorbed They're given from the sun, they're absorbed by the green leaf, and they're getting to the energy center of whatever's going on there, right? But basically, there is a coherence effect that's highlighting the correct way to go. And what coherence means is that two things can simultaneously be in different places, and that does not confuse a quantum physicist, right? And they have also used it to explain how birds migrate. So birds, it turns out, will rely on the magnetic field of the Earth, right? And this will have an effect on photons of light that are absorbed by a bird's antenna. They split and they have something called spin. And one of the bits of spin is influenced by the Earth's magnetic field, and it is also a quantum effect. There's more. The sense of smell, still don't know how it fully works, but physicists have been working to explain that there's a quantum tunneling reason behind this. And finally, I get to the daddy of it all, right? Computational power. This is where we're going in the 21st century. In the 20th century, we split the atom, and we sent man to the moon, work of physicists. In the 21st century, we're going to go into the galaxy of the mind, and we're going to explain it using quantum computing, which states that you can have on and on-off at the same time. And this gives a huge amount more of predictive ability. And that's what it comes down to in science, is setting up a good model and letting it run and working out then. Basically, I've read about physicists hoping to work on things like how memory works, how all of the bits of the brain are wired up together. And then finally, right, I get to my main point for this evening. As of today, I'm told that there are on the order of billions of Earth-like planets in our universe, in our galaxy, right? Billions. Mark my words, it will be physicists that discover life on another planet. And that will be perhaps the most profound biological discovery that has ever been shown, right? Yes, Darwin has made sense of the zoo that is biological life. But surely it is showing that it is not a once-off, that yes, it could exist somewhere else, is going to be the be-all and end-all. And it will be astrobiologists that are doing this, right? These are astrophysicists that are looking at exoplanets, planets that exist outside of our solar system. And they are developing tools, and they're very, very much on the way to fantastic tools that will spectroscopically be able to identify, hopefully, life on other planets. Of course, and I spoke today with an astrophysicist about this, we seem to have a fascination with carbon. Physicists are exploring the possibility that perhaps there might be silicon-based life in the universe. Indeed, there might be far more complex-based life in various scenarios. It is that window of wonder that we will open on the biological world in the coming years. And hopefully in 20 years, we'll both be back here talking about how physicists have induced life on Mars, or indeed have found life somewhere else. So thank you so much, and I hope you'd agree with me that physics has done more for biology than biology has done for itself.
Okay, so just on your last point there, Shane, this idea that there might be life on another planet, yes, it is plausible, and it's actually plausible based on what Darwin discovered. So everything that Darwin said was not dependent on DNA. It is the logic of his argument, just all it requires is heritability and competition for limited resources. And you're going to have those on other planets as well once you get heritability. And so we know from biology, we know from what Darwin has told us that it doesn't have to be DNA. So yeah, congratulations on figuring that out. My last point is going to be to do with another biological oddity, another thing that a physicist would never have done. And in fact, the people who did this, probably their own parents were going, really, is this a waste of your time? Because there were a few scientists, and one Japanese scientist in particular, whose name I don't remember but is on the next slide, who spent a lot of his time, he went to America, and he was collecting jellyfish, right? So I brought my model of a jellyfish. This is just mainly me having fun, right? There's a green jellyfish. And so, it's edible if anybody wants some jelly later. I went for the props as my distinguishing characteristic today, and this is for anybody who votes for me. They can have some jelly. But so this guy, it's lime jelly. So this guy went collecting jellyfish, and not just any old jellyfish though. He went collecting deep sea jellyfish that fluoresce, right? So here you get, in deep seas, you get fluorescent jellyfish. These naturally fluoresce, and so it's Shimamura. And they naturally fluoresce because they have a protein that has very unimaginatively been called green fluorescent protein. And these fluoresce, of course, in deep seas. They're generating their own light. So this guy got obsessed with these, collecting them for many, many years. And he, along with some other people, eventually isolated the protein and the gene for that protein. And if you want to talk about tools, this is the tool that has revolutionized biology and molecular biology. And it was discovered by biologists for biologists, and it's still biology. This green fluorescent protein naturally fluoresces when it is expressed, right? So when the protein is there, it glows. If you want to study a living animal, or a living plant, you want to study it when it's alive. There's a big difference between a living organism and a dead organism. There's only so much you can discover by looking at a dead one. There's these people who were taking these infinitesimal slices of Einstein's brain and trying to discover, why was Einstein so clever? I don't think anybody's going to discover anything about what made Einstein clever by looking at slices of his dead brain. It was the living brain that would have been interesting. And with this green fluorescent protein, you can look at living organisms. You can look at what happens with genes inside a living organism. So what you need to do is you need to just tag the green fluorescent protein gene onto the one that you're interested in and see where it glows up. So these pictures here are this green fluorescent protein that's now been modified to have several different colors, and it's expressed in a growing fly, right? So this is a fly, and this is the nervous system of the fly. You can see there, and it's glowing. So you can watch it growing, and you can watch it acting. This is not something that is not a tool that came from physics, and it is one of the most valuable, the most wonderful tools that modern biology has. You can study genes in living organisms and see what happens. You can see neurons reacting to a stimulus. You can see them reacting differently the next time, because now they not only recognize it, but they remember it. You can see learning take place inside a living brain in a fly. It is amazing. But if we're going to talk about physics, this green fluorescent protein has also been used to make a laser inside a cell. A laser inside a cell. Nature photonics, but it's a green fluorescent protein we are giving to physics. So we have cells that contain this green fluorescent protein that they make into a laser, and when they use it as a laser, the cell continues to live. So the laser function doesn't destroy the cell. So this opens up huge possibilities in terms of diagnostics and examinations, and also, and I'll end on this one, viruses have been engineered to make a battery. So here we have a lithium-ion battery that has been made by viruses. So viruses that have been depositing carbon and making a battery. So not only has biology looked after itself quite well, thank you very much, but it's not an isolated field either. The discoveries in biology have amazing potential. You've possibly heard about the idea of DNA computers. DNA has been storing information for billions of years, and there's an idea that perhaps it could store information in computers as well. This is some of biology and some of the discoveries of biology going into other fields. If a computer is built out of DNA, I'm not going to claim that's biology. I'm not going to use Shane's trick, but but the field does not exist in isolation. So my argument is biology is a field quite distinct from physics. It is a very vibrant, dynamic, creative, imaginative field that has an imagination that is not limited to the type of things that physicists think about. We have discovered amazing things, made wonderful explanations, and with predictive power as well. And this is not to do with physics. We can manage quite well ourselves. Thank you very much. And that's it.
Okay, so we've had a couple of technical issues, but we're going to try this one more time. So get voting. The votes are coming in. And we're going to get some final thoughts from our judges. Now, feel free to give a very honest opinion here. It's not just about physics and biology. It's really about Shane and Aoife. So.
Okay. Well, yes, thank you for that, Aoife. Now, physics, just to talk about your battery there, obviously it cannot be very efficient. I mean, you need loads and loads and loads of viruses to make it. That's why we don't have viruses making our batteries. We have something else. But anyway, Did physics do more for biology than biology did for itself? Yes. And I think I do have to agree with this motion. I mean, even take Darwin. I mean, I think he's probably the greatest guy in biology ever. You know, kind of him, you know, studying all these animals and deriving his theory, you know, fantastic, you know, discovery. However, it is kind of walking in the dark, you know, with, you know, your eyes closed, and kind of physics illuminates, you know, the whole, you know, shines a new light onto the theory by, you know, giving tools to be able to discover the DNA and genes and stuff like that, to be able to actually understand fully this theory. Because, I mean, Darwin didn't know how all this works.
No, Darwin didn't know about genes, Darwin didn't know about DNA, but the reason people were so interested in discovering the structure of DNA is because they knew from genetics experiments and from logical experiments beforehand that DNA was your man. And that was, so they were interested in discovering the structure because they already knew, based on pure biology, that it was the interesting molecule. So.
Okay. I think physics has a very big impact on biology, but in the long run, biology has more impact on its own field than physics could, because, well, physicists may build the wall and may build the window in the wall that biologists may look through, but they look through it their whole life for a long period, and they find more evidence. They find more information. They find more use for it. Like, physicists have big impact on it, but not bigger than biology itself.
I actually think that physics has done a lot for biology. I mean, let's take NASA, for example. They sent the Curiosity rover up to Mars to do what? Look for life. Signs of life that could be, that is, you know, signs of, well, biology. So, through that, I think that physics has advanced biology more, well, now anyway.
No, there was.
Well,
however, there was no methane found, right? So there's no carbon-based life. There's the chances of finding carbon-based life or remains of it on Mars are exceedingly small. However, we've dared to look. We've asked the question, right?
Exactly.
And what I'm saying is, in a very tongue-in-cheek manner, right, is that physics has stuck its oar in every so often into biology, and I guess it's that disruptive science. And I'm sure that, like, Aoife, we could probably turn this around and have let the biologists have a go at physics, maybe. But it's that disruptive oar of sticking our nose in every so often that's had, I guess, a lot of positive effects. From the cell to the tools to the logic that was proposed by Schrödinger and his colleagues, and to astrobiology of today. It's just it's physics' needs to try and control everything, right? We want to understand the entire universe and put simple models on it, right?
I'm going to try and get a couple of quick questions from the floor.
Yeah, and just in terms of how mutually exclusive these fields are, like, how primitive do you reckon biology would be now if it wasn't for physics?
So, I mean, it's hard to answer that. It's like, you know, it's not, you know. So if you have a tool to use, you'll use it. That makes sense. But it.
Going to be very primitive in terms of, you know, like in a medical field, but I'm just wondering what other parts in biology would still be as advanced today if it wasn't for some of the stuff in the physics world.
So it's hard. It's not very easy to. I don't know if I can answer that. I mean, so in terms of like, so no, but it's like, you know, it's because how would you have discovered the structure of DNA? You might have discovered it some other way.
Would you have? I'm just
but
trying
I
to ask that kind of questions.
That.
Yeah.
I can't answer that. You know, so I can't answer what would have happened to printing if Gutenberg hadn't invented the press. You know, it's impossible to say what would have happened. You know, the absence of a way to do it would have been a great motivator to find a way of doing it. So if we hadn't had X-rays, you know, there would have been a great motivator to do something else. But I don't know what that would have been because these things don't come easily. None of these things comes easily or predictably. And that's one of the things about science, right? And that's the argument we're constantly making to the government and the funding agencies right now, is you don't know ahead of time how something's going to work out. And so without knowing, like in the absence of X-rays, well, maybe biologists would have discovered X-rays. Who knows? I mean, so it's, you know, it's just I just can't answer the question. I mean, there's lots of things I can tell you, things that were discovered without any tools and that, like, without any physical tools that were only discovered with biology. So we got Mendel managed to see genes with his mind by just logical deduction and using pea plants, okay? Darwin figured out the whole process of evolution by examining organisms across the planet. Thomas Hunt Morgan figured out that chromosomes are carrying the genetic material, that genes are discrete bits along a chromosome rather than a whole thing, just by looking at flies in the lab. Other people, so there's Fisher, who is a statistician, made huge contributions to genetics and how genes are transmitted and how evolution works by pure mathematical deduction. None of these things. So this was, and these are all discoveries that still stand. And so how important was it to know the structure of DNA? Like, it's a beautiful molecule, but the principles, we understood the principles of how DNA worked without the structure. So we understood the principle that DNA carried genetic information, and we knew the components of DNA were understood without knowing the pretty picture of the helix. So there's lots that's known independent of it. I mean, so I think the tools are useful, but it's saying if you weren't able to take an X-ray image of the structure, what would have happened? I can't tell you.
Well, are you saying that you'd actually be able to understand the structure of DNA now if it wasn't for physics?
I was saying that it's impossible for me to answer the question,
No,
but
okay.
I think, I mean, so like. I mean, I don't know how you can say if it wasn't for physics. I just don't. It's so like you say, like even if it wasn't for computers, we use computers for so much. It's impossible to go back to a time when it wasn't there and, imagine how would you have discovered. I just can't answer. Sorry.
Oh, it's getting interesting now. Any other questions that people may or may not be able to answer?
Okay, given that Aoife has had a lot of the questions, I've got one for Shane. Okay, Shane. Your argument was built on 3 basic principles. Pretty pictures, claiming logic and scientific method exclusively for physics, and every time somebody did something interesting, characterizing that person as a physicist.
Yes.
Now, if you...
And what's wrong with that? Yeah.
If you take away the pretty pictures...
You'd know biology left.
And by the way, how did you get into my office and get a photograph of it so tidy? Okay. If you take away the pretty pictures, yes. If you concede that the scientific method is the scientific method and not just the exclusive preserve of physicists...
I don't, but carry on.
Okay. Well then,
no,
you are doing something that you claim you don't do, which is you are denying a reality. I mean, if you really are a physicist, and if as a physicist you don't deny reality, then you can't deny that every scientist has a basic scientific method, which goes all the way back to when science was just natural philosophy, and even before that. Mm-hmm. And it's not something that can be claimed for one hermetically sealed tiny subdivision, even if it happens to be your preferred hermetically sealed tiny subdivision. So if you concede that scientific method is scientific and not exclusively physical, and if you stop the technique of saying every time somebody does something interesting, then he or she must be a physicist, can you give an example of your argument that doesn't depend on a pretty picture, doesn't depend on claiming logic for physics when logic is something that is the foundation of all knowledge, and doesn't depend on transmuting a la the Philosopher's Stone, every other interesting scientist into a physicist?
Well, I think you're taking my points and you're saying you assume they're all incorrect, so therefore, Shane, proceed from there. But what I'm showing you is that pretty pictures do work, right? Pretty pictures they're not just pretty, they're informative, right? So an electron diffraction pattern might be pretty, but it's extremely rich in data, and that's what was used in that prime example where we were able to discover the actual double helical nature of DNA based upon a pretty picture. I'm not claiming the scientific method as physics-based. I'm claiming the reductionist scientific method as a physics one where something can be reduced to a simple law that will have massive predictive powers. And there are very few things that have the predictive power of relativity or quantum physics or these sorts of things that are much more watertight than the other theories that are presented to me. Yes, dark matter, well, we don't have a theory for that yet, and we're working on it. But of course, like science, we all know that science doesn't know everything. If it did, it would stop. But
Shane, taking that attitude, we don't know 97% of our subject. But trust us, the 3% we do know is accurate, and it's physics, is not a particularly sound basis for an argument.
But you're confusing what we know and what we don't know. That like what we know with like physics has been handling uncertainty for a long time. So it seems perhaps a little.
But that's not exclusive to physics. Handling uncertainty is the essence of the
but let me
human
finish
condition.
my point. So if you were to take like how we can describe an electron around a molecule, we can say with probability where something is. That's not to say we can't describe the system. We're describing the system using reductionist technological techniques that allow us to develop a theory. And a theory, of course, is different to a hypothesis. A theory is something that's tested. That's why, of course, creationists are always like, oh, it's a theory. But no, it's not a theory. It's been shown. But what I'm saying is that physics has I think, that edge often amongst the scientists in its predictive power when it produces a theory. So, like, what's wrong with that? I'm not trying to say biology is rubbish or anything like that. I think biology is an amazingly complex system, and the reason that physicists hadn't got into it before is because we didn't have the tools in order to try and reduce it to simple theories and statements. But what I'm saying is that now we're getting there, and of course, really my whole point of getting this whole thing together is to say that we need to work closer, right? We need to think that biological students need to have more mathematical rigor in their undergraduates, just as physicists should be exposed to the wonders of the biological world, so that the problems, the new problems that are out there, are given to the breadth of science and not just to the traditional disciplines. And that's built upon a respect and an understanding of the problems and the accomplishments that each of us have contributed to the general argument of science. But I think it's not fair to say that physics is like it is fair to say that the physical principles, the laws and the theories that physicists have worked on are extremely predictive in their abilities. They're extremely accurate.
They're only accurate because they're based on very simple toy systems and very simple models.
Yeah.
What most physicists, you mentioned the undergraduate curriculum, most physicists get as far as understanding the hydrogen atom. They never get to the hydrogen molecule purely because the Schrödinger equation can't solve it accurately.
Yeah.
Okay, the chemists start from there and they work on. You also seem to love reductionism hugely. Physics can't explain emerging properties at this time, and most biological systems are emergent, and even the biologists can't explain emergent properties either, and that is the really interesting question.
Absolutely, yeah.
Simple thermodynamics, right? Biological systems are open systems, far from reversibility, another fascinating area. So instead of getting reductionist, we should get.
But isn't thermodynamics like the perfect example of an amazingly complex system that can be, well, if you pardon the pun, boiled down to a couple of principles, like in classical thermodynamics, that we're able to use as guidelines, and I think that's an amazing predictive power.
They're only for simple, closed or isolated systems, not for open systems like you have in biology.
Absolutely, I accept that the level of complexity is it's immense.
And complexity is another thing for another day, I suppose.
Yeah.
So remember, this is your last chance to rubbish the argument of either of the speakers.
This is just a question for both of you. Do you get a chance in your work to work across disciplines, and actually you're here kind of battling each other today, but do you get a chance to work together with either side in what you do or with others?
Well, Aoife and I know each other through the Science Gallery, which is where art and science collide, but for me it's often where scientists collide, and that's great. It's wonderful, and it's only as I've moved on at the later stages of my career that I started to get friendly and to know biologists. I've known the chemists a long time, but I think it's really important that we start to talk to one another, that we make our disciplines open, that we stop using jargon, that we learn a common scientific language that we can use to approach massive problems. So at the moment, I only work with a few biologists, but who knows?
To add.
Okay, on that note, we're going to have a look at the results, hopefully, if it works. Stand by. And there we go. Okay, so on that last point there, I think it's probably worth pointing out that although this is a controversial topic, I guess it is worth pointing out that in the Science Gallery we are very much in the spirit of sciences helping each other out, and we're very much a cross-disciplinary organisation. So we thought maybe we'd have one more vote that would be maybe a little more reflective of just the night that's in it. I'm going to have to ask Shane to come up again. Okay, that's perfect now, yeah, so the votes are coming in. So, yeah, we're going to make it very personal. Yeah, so you can't spoil your vote this time. You have to decide Shane or Aoife. There seems like a lot of reluctant voters out there. So, here they come. It's not a competition, but there will be prizes. Okay, so I've been counting 55 voters and we're on 54, so someone else out there has to vote. Just do it. Decide. There we go. Somebody left. Great. Okay. A moment of truth, I guess. Oh. I think a physicist would say within error bars. It's Ladies and gentlemen, just a round of applause for our speakers, Professor Aoife McLysaght, Professor Shane Bergin. Can I get a round of applause for our judges tonight? And I haven't been able to say it until now because I thought it might influence the vote, but our current exhibition in the Science Gallery is called Grow Your Own. It's about synthetic biology, so it is a little bit more towards the biology end of the spectrum, but we have had a lot of physics exhibitions recently. So, and we've one more vote, you're right, Shane, because although this is the first x-axis factor, there is a chance we could do it again. Okay, so there is the option that we might run an event like this again. Would that be something people would be interested in? Okay, then these are some of the titles we've had picked, so please vote now. We've had one vote so far. There we go, great.
We could take thinking about it.
So we're going to finish after this vote, but if anyone has a suggestion for a future x-axis factor, just come up to us at the end and we'll talk. Yeah, we have a question. So what is smart society?
It's the idea of our government is funding a huge amount of research based on the idea that they want to have a smart economy, right? So a major economic advantage has been demonstrated throughout history by scientific advancement. Political advancement has been as a consequence a lot of time of scientific advancement. So they're pegging our hopes and dreams on a smart economy. But I think it's perhaps interesting to debate the idea of a smart society. So I thought that was something that's really cool.
Okay, so as I said, if there's another suggestion you'd have for a topic, just come up to us at the end. So this is our final vote, and the world, well, yeah, everyone's obsessed with the world ending, so that's, I guess, not surprising. Okay, so just the last word, if you could maybe leave your clickers behind you on the seats, that'd be wonderful. And thank you for your attention. I hope you enjoy the event.